The question is that this bill be now read a second time. I call the member for Hasluck.
Deputy Speaker, I rise to support the Higher Education Support Amendment No. 1 Bill for 2011. What I like about the bill is, from a personal background of involvement in education, training and in a number of areas that have occurred over the last probably decade, where RTOs, or registered training organisations, are now taking a real and serious place in the delivery of skill development and knowledge impartment, because Australia, in order to be successful within the world in which we live and in the industries that we will be shaping and developing as the future continues to appear over the horizon, then I believe that the lifelong learning stance I've taken on many occasions, both within my previous role as an educator, certainly as a Pro-Chancellor of Edith Cowan University, but more recently in the fields of health, that this legislation enables us to position the way in which we develop skills for the workforce far better than we have to some extent in the past. And the flexibility provision within the bill is a tremendous opportunity to move and allow those who make the decisions in the provision of training and higher education and in the vet sector the capacity to respond to industry needs, to respond to the emerging needs of new fields that continue to arise out of the way in which our society moves. I recently, on being elected to the seat of Hasluck, met with a number of actually not a number, all of our RTOs and people from the vet sector and from the secondary school sector to talk about the synergies of how do we provide, and also at the same time recognising some are in competition with each other for the funding that's available, but how do we provide for an emerging need of workforce skills within the rapidly developing economy of this country, and particularly in Western Australia, certainly in terms of supporting not only the resource sector, but also the sectors of frontline services that are needed to be afforded in the way in which companies and businesses, including the public sector, provides services. And what I appreciated from the discussion is the rich thinking and depth of thinking that has occurred between the RTOs, but certainly all of them expressed the need to have some flexibility within the way in which they attract students on a continuum of that lifelong journey. So age wasn't a factor from their perspective. But how do we provide the best possible education and training that we can within the institutional arrangements that exist? And in those discussions, what has evolved is the tremendous ability to agree that they want to be leaders in the work that we do within the electorate, to provide opportunities for training, for educational pathways. But also what they looked at was how do they link with all of the institutions that this Act covers in an effective way of ensuring the points of connection into lifelong learning pathways and the skilling pathways required. And there's been some innovative thinking that has arisen in that group. And what I do like about the legislation is that propensity for flexible arrangements that enables an institution to provide the type of training, and as my colleague earlier talked about, the capacity to train pilots. Hasluck values the access to higher education provided under the HECS help and the vet fee help initiatives, and certainly young people within the electorate partake of the Commonwealth programs that are in place, that have been put in place by successive governments. One of the things I do want to support very strongly are Pathfinders, and I mean Pathfinders in two senses: those who are educated, skilled and trained for the opportunities in a career, but also for the institutions that provide the knowledge that is needed for the innovative and knowledge society. And so there are some challenges around the way in which we have to think, and we have to think outside the square. Because we can't always make assumptions that the current training we provide will meet tomorrow's future. And in a sense, I often look at this sector and I sometimes wonder whether we're teaching the future of our nation's young people with yesterday's curriculum and with today's teaching staff. But some of the challenges that we have to think about, and this Act, or the bill, provides for that, and that is to look at the universal pathways that needed to be joined together in the complexity of the provision of training and education, but also for us to think outside the square. And what I do like, as I said, is to provide flexibility in the principal purpose requirement for the recognition of bodies corporate as a higher education or VET providers. I think that gives tremendous capacity to providers to look at the future, to look at 2030 and say, what is it that we really need to start thinking about in the way in which we skill the workforce? The universal right to an education, I think, is absolutely paramount. And the other aspect we've got to build into that is the capacity building for the future. And I want tertiary education to be a factor that is important in the lives of all Australians, that at different points in their career they can turn to the right training organisation, seek to gain qualifications, skills, again, knowledge, that they can apply in the pathways that they will seek. Because I honestly believe that by 2030 we will be part of a global society, global world, global economy, in which the transferability of skills will be universal. And what I like about what we're encapsulating in this bill is that is the possibility. And I compliment the Minister on bringing forward the amendments that have been identified in the Act, because I think sometimes we need to take stocktake, look at what the inhibitors and barriers are, and then remove them and work to remove them collaboratively. And that's why the Coalition and those of us on this side support this bill, because it does provide. Madam Deputy Speaker, to me this bill, in seeking to simplify administrative arrangements for vocational education training providers and to ensure that quality providers are able to apply for and offer the fee help and the VET fee help places to students, I think is absolutely critical if we are going to develop the capacity of our future nations. I also believe that the intent to provide the Commonwealth with a better process to manage provider risk, and therefore through a subsequent increase in provider approvals, there will also be a rise in students accessing both fees. And to me that augurs well for the future, because it gives us the capacity and gives our training providers, it gives industry some assurance that the providers that they engage with or have their young people skilled through are providing standards that the industry is also looking for. And what I do want to acknowledge is the variety that is now starting to prevail in the way in which RTOs offer courses and the types of courses. In Western Australia, I went to Westrac and had a look at their training program, looked at their training facilities, and was absolutely envious that the students who go through that particular program of training to be employed both by Westrac, but what I also equally liked, by employers who see the quality of the program as meeting their needs within the resource sector. And in talking to a couple of the lecturers, what they now really appreciate is the fact that skills that they acquired within the industry have now been given the opportunity to be taught through technology that was not around when they went through and did training, the use of simulators that enable young people or even those returning for second chance education to better hone the skill level to that is required. And if this bill gives that latitude and gives that flexibility to those who govern these institutions, then again I want to acknowledge that highly beneficial aspect of the bill. Because all of us in this House want to see a vibrant, rigorous process of education and training, but also our capacity to be competitive against the markets that will continue to evolve around this globe. But I think more importantly, to make us competitive in those companies that transcend the boundaries of sovereignty, those who transcend the countries in which they had their origin. And if we think of companies like Rio Tinto, BHP, they no longer operate within the borders of this nation. They in fact operate in a borderless society in which their skills and the capacity of their staff and their workers is of a standard that enables them to provide the workforce that generates not only profitability for the companies, but also provides the avenues to refine, sharpen and hone skills that make this country highly competitive. And I think that the access to the fees that are available are tremendous. The 2007 income contingent loans were extended to the vet sector in that year, and I think that that was a tremendous move in relation to building the opportunity of developing capacity. These programs provide a loan for all or part of the student's tuition costs, which has to be repaid once the student exceeds a set level of income. So it does accord anybody wanting to access these in meeting the criteria and then having the opportunity to undertake a training program that meets their needs, but also meets their needs in being competitive to the talent pool that will be required. A number of students in Hasluck access the fee help to continue their tertiary studies, and that warms my own sense of commitment to learning and the acquisition of skills, because I know that those students will continue into pathways that will lead them to incredible opportunities that I wish that if I could turn back the clock and undertake the type of training and education that is now available within the tertiary and training sector, then I know that my capacity would have been extended far beyond that I have now reached. And certainly, I think all of us in this House acknowledge the fact that our contribution to future generations through the support of this legislation provides pathways that will be so rich, but will be so focused on making our nation a greater nation within the commercial, business and workforce sectors in a way that will generate the wealth and the income that we need to support the way of life that we have become accustomed to in this nation. And to that end, I think the simplification of the administrative requirements in delivering efficiencies to both providers in the Commonwealth and improving the Commonwealth's ability to manage provider risk and increase the rate of provider approval therefore increases the number of students able to access income contingent loans through quality providers in both the higher and vet sectors. I also want to say that it allows for diversity in the future. And I think that when we think back to the past and what our parents saw, from horse and cart to space travel, skills have been acquired, and I think that the knowledge that is available now that you will be able to compress into a decade will be equal to that all of us have had in a lifetime. And I think this gives those training and education vet providers, higher education providers, an opportunity to respond to the flexibility of the future and deliver the courses required to skill all Australians. So I acknowledge the bill and I support the amendments within the bill. Thank you, Deputy Chair.